All right, let's, Cynthia,
If we all stand and there's the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
thank you, Cynthia. Can we do a roll call, please?
Yes.
I got you.
Marquez de la Plata.
Here.
Mike Nichols.
Present.
Joe Roga.
Here.
Spencer Scott.
Here.
Betsy Van Dyke.
Here.
Cynthia Strucker.
Here.
Brian Ambriola.
Here.
Lonnie Lazar.
Here.
And Ty Hilton.
Here. Thank you. Could we move to approving the agenda? Do we have someone on the council that makes a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
We have a second, Cynthia seconds. Can we do a raise of hands?
Yeah.
All in favor? Okay, that's everyone. Now it's time, if there is anyone on the council that has a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda, now is the time to let us know. Not something I use. No, not yet. Okay, you do it when we get to this stuff. That's all right. Okay. All right, consent agenda, which is really just approving minutes from our last meeting. Hope everyone had a chance to read them. If anyone has any comments or wants to make a motion to approve, now's the time to do it.
Well, I do have a quick comment. It's very picky, okay? But here on the introductions, my name was misspelled. And so it's S-C-R-E.
Does anyone want to make a move to approve the minutes?
Well,
I approve consent.
Okay. Let's do a hand raise. Everyone approve? Yep, that's everyone, unanimous. Okay, now we're gonna go to public comments on matters not on the agenda. So this is the time, if something is on the agenda, we'll get to it. If it's something you want to make a statement about now, it's not on the agenda, now's the time to do it. Just so everyone knows the kind of format, if you've not been here before, we can't really have a discussion about what you bring up, but we can listen to what you say, and then we can address it separately from this meeting. Go ahead.
I think I don't know if this is the right time, but I'll say it now because I think I have the space. I meant to have forms out today, but in case anybody doesn't know, we now have a website. This is lowerrussianriver.com, and it's to get put in your email, and you can sign up to get updates about meetings like this and other meetings around Russian River governance. So if you guys have not signed up yet, go to russianriver.com or lowerrussianriver.com and put your email and we'll get you updates about meetings like this. Great. Cool.
Anyone else?
We have one hand raised online, and just a note to all of our online attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand to be unmuted.
Okay, we have someone here live. Why don't you go first?
So my name is Ross Mendenhall, and I own the property 14501 Armstrong Woods Road, which is right across the street from the school playground. And I am concerned about I've owned the property since 1999, and the Sonoma Water has done some things to help with the flooding. There's also lots of homeless issues, which I have some responsibility for. And there's also the aspect of Five Creek. And this school right here was built on top of the creek right after World War II. And Sonoma Water, all they say they can do is dredge the channel between the school and Armstrong Woods Road, which is no longer working very well. You know, I have an argument with Mill Street neighbors. I'm the first to flood. And it cuts off this whole neighborhood. And, I've been talking with more neighbors recently, and I think there's pretty much a consensus among the people who live on, you know, Fife Creek, Armstrong Woods Rib Valley to request the county to do something more. Personally, I'm most interested in restoring the creek to something that's more alive than it is now. And so that's why I came to this meeting. And you know, I think that any local government organization which reports to Linda Hopkins needs to bring it to her attention. I've brought it to her attention. I've talked to her personally. You know, she's overwhelmed, you know. And to take care of the environment, I think is the most important thing we can do right now. You know,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we do have a time limit. Thank you, Bill. Anyone else have a comment that's not on the agenda?
I have a request. So I'm wondering if you all can work with the Board of Supervisors to petition PG&E to develop a hotline or a number where consumers can call and find out their plan to bury power lines. It's all over the television that they're gonna do this. And with the recent downing of wires, there are people in the community that have been out for 4 days. And I have tried to reach somebody in PG&E to find out, like, when are you burying the power line in my neighborhood? And it's just obfuscation all the way through. So if you could find, you know, like some kind of, I think it's more of a county-wide issue, but, you know, like a beeline right to who we need to talk to. That'd be great.
It's a great point. Anyone else in the audience here before we go to online?
Hi, this is probably nothing to do with here, but maybe you would know worse than I had recently read that they're taking down the dam at Pillsbury Lake. And they were gonna take the water, part of it's going to go back to the Eel River, and part of it's gonna come down to the Russian River, and their big brag was, we'll have more water in the summer. Well, that means we're gonna have a lot more water in the winter. I didn't know who was in charge of whether or not they okay this. How you find out more about it, didn't know if anybody here knew anything. I
Okay,
know it's probably not.
that's okay. That's your point
Jurisdiction,
of this
but
section to
I'm
bring this
thinking
stuff up.
future flooding.
Okay, great. Anyone else here in the building? So why don't we go to online? Oh, sorry, Benny. Okay,
So I want to talk about like the homeless problem. Well, I used to be homeless for like a very long time. And there's certain things that attract the homeless in certain areas. And I was gonna say like services and then drugs actually, like if you could stop the flow of drugs like to this area, yeah, it would actually cut it down a lot. Like it goes by like word of mouth. And I mean, and then another thing too, like whenever I was like released from jail, they always were like, there's places they will can send you to go, and this tends to be one of the places that they do that. You know, and what I'm worried about with it is, well, for one, it brings up theft, like there's assaults, and then also like future addiction problems can come from that. And then the number one thing that I'm worried about with it, especially with fentanyl nowadays, is fire dangers. You know, like this, it's like a major thing. They camp out in the woods and the cops don't clear these things out. The same places have been there for years, you know? And it's just scary sometimes, like during the summer. You know?
Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
all right, thank you.
I have a comment on that. I just, 2 weeks ago now, it was on the local news, it was on the news stations that Nevada has been sending to San Francisco. San Francisco authorities been sending up this way. About 14, more or less, a little more, Carrie and I were homeless. We had a job in Novato. They knocked on our door, knew they lose it. say, quote unquote, go to Petaluma Cots, or better still, come out here. So, the Nevada drug tourists, as they're calling them, have been funneling out this way. So it's not so much, it's just gotten out of hand. He's right, it's gotten out of freaking hand. I can do the trash service 10 o'clock AM, 4 PM. I really don't want to go back out at 10 PM anymore because of said habits. And it just, there's gotta be some solutions for somewhere. And last week though, fortunately, two of the deputies were walking down toward the plaza. And some guy with a vicious dog let it poop on the community bank. And I started screaming because that's the way I operate to get anything done. And so those two fortunately came down and started patrolling. Vehicles were moved, people were gone the next couple hours when I came back into town. So something has got to be done. Oh, and one more thing. Somebody's brilliant idea, I don't, I'm not gonna back mouth or what have you. There's been some undesirables that's been hanging around the senior center. And somebody's bright idea to have a warming station, I don't know, I'm not gonna step on anybody's toes, but it was not a brilliant idea. One of
Location wise.
yeah, location wise. And from what I just heard that Clean River Alliance trailer has been.
All right, Sally. Thank you. We gotta keep going.
No,
We're gonna go online.
We have a
Tracy, can you-
hand raised from Sheila. Sheila, unmute to speak.
Thank you. So I have more of a question in regards to Riverside Drive and Highway 116. At one time, that road was not designated to be a part of the maintenance plan. And that road, it's really important that we can get someone out there to repair the entire road, because whenever there's rain, that road becomes Riverside Drive. It literally does. And there's a lot of potholes, and we have a lot of vacation rentals that are on that property. So I would like to ask, or how we can get that prioritized, that road back in under our governance to be repaired and prioritized. So that would be my first thing. And then the second thing will be, I have noticed that there are jet skis in our river. It happens in the summertime, and I just noticed it about a week ago. And I don't know if this would fall under our jurisdiction, or maybe you'd advise that I follow up with Fish and Game, but I think that we should stop having jet skis on the river. And of course, I'd prefer to not have gas powered vehicles on the river. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, anyone else with their hand up?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think those are all really great. So we're gonna move to county update. Supervisor Hawkins.
What about council member?
Oh, sorry, I skipped it. We don't need to hear from us. Sorry. Yeah. All right, now we'll do the same for folks on the council. If it's something not on the agenda, now it's time to bring it up to, yeah.
Okay, as many of you know, I am the MAC liaison to the Citizens Advisory Group that's working on wastewater issues for Monte Rio and Villa Grande. And in that capacity, I have set up a tour of Riverbend RV Park, the one with the big Paul Bunyan. Okay, just as an educational opportunity. And I chose that particular place because for a lot of reasons, it's very small. So I want to know how that works out financially. It's also one of the first places to flood And that's obviously something we deal with. And it also has incredibly small pieces of ground, a trailer and a picnic table, basically, to try to get this system in. So I just really want to know how that works, because those are all big issues for certainly my community. So at any rate, it's going to be Saturday, February the 17th, from 1 to 3 p.m. And best I know, I've got you on the list. So, you know, if anyone would like to come, please do so. This is an issue that may be coming to some of your communities as well. Okay, and the wonderful thing, one last thing about this is that both the engineer who designed it and the contractor who installed it are going to be there. So we ought to be able to get pretty much all of our questions answered.
Great, thanks. Anyone else on the council? Betsy?
19th of February, Russian River Pride will be having a gala event at Down Ranch. It's a dinner and we will be distributing grant money to 5 or 6 different organizations, I forgot which. And tickets are available at Eventbrite.
Great, thanks. Anyone else?
We're getting a request from the interpreters to maybe speak a little bit louder and slower. We're trying to get a better audio system, but right now we still have the owl and it's not great.
I have, oh, go ahead, Mike.
One quick comment. Many of you may be aware that there's a GMRS radio network throughout West County and throughout the county entirely. And we will be doing a training over in Occidental on March 10th. We have not set the venue yet, but stay tuned. We will be distributing radios and basically presenting a training session for all attendees. So keep that on your agenda if you're interested in participating in the radio project, which is really, really important, and it's paid off for those of us in Cazadero and other remote communities during these times with power failures and communication failures. So thank you.
Where can we get notification about where it will be?
We'll push that information out probably on Supervisor Hopkins' newsletter.
And I have one too on February 17th at the Monterey Community Center. Friends Rio Nito and Monterey groups are hosting West County Homeowners Insurance Seminar. And we're gonna have, everyone loves insurance out here, right? Homeowners insurance. So it's a good place to learn some stuff about what's going on. Someone from the California State Insurance Commissioner's Office and someone from the United Policies Holders, which is a nonprofit. They're not aligned with the insurance industry per se, but they are advocates for consumers. So we'll talk about everything for what you can do to protect your policy, how to navigate obtaining insurance in today's marketplace, mitigation standards, insights on filing insurance claims. There's gonna be a lot more. So if you have insurance questions or worried about insurance, it's a good day for us in West County we have some good people to inform us about what's going on.
Will you repeat the date, time, and place?
Yeah, February 17th, 11:30 to 1 at Monterey Community Center. Anyone else? Okay, Supervisor Hopkins, you're up.
Right. I will stand up so that hopefully the owl can hear me. I'm going to start with storm impacts because I think that's probably fresh on everyone's mind. And because this is a broadly listed county update, I will also try to address as many of the public comments that came up and are not on the agenda as I can. So the biggest infrastructure impacts that we saw from the storm occurred in Rio Nito, where a major culvert failure in the first atmospheric river led to a sinkhole opening up on HOA property, which caused an entire creek, the creek that runs between Canyon 7 and Rio Nito Road. And of course, Rio Nito Road is the only way around when Armstrong Woods Road floods. So it's a critical evacuation route That creek basically then poured into the road Canyon 7 and also under the HOA property, undermining the barbecue area, Pee Wee Golf, and also some structures. And unfortunately flooding sort of like some low-lying apartments on Canyon 7 as well. And thank you for Pip for responding in real time. And I was able to come out and tour the area while it was flooding and then also show roads crews what was happening and then coordinate with the director of public infrastructure. Another major failure is with Austin Creek Road in Cazadero, where we actually had multiple slides and failures, which are unfortunately the harder kind of slide to deal with. I mind less when mud comes down on top of a road. It's a lot harder when the mud goes out underneath of the road because it's a much more expensive fix. And unfortunately, really chunks of asphalt fell into Austin Creek and the entire sort of bank is undermined. And so that's likely to be an expensive sort of project that's going to be complex with permitting, but it is on our top tier priority list for major infrastructure repairs from the storm. Another critical failure was Giovannetti Road in Forestville. And that was one that we saw with the first atmospheric river. So one way in, one way out road with neighbors who couldn't access their property due to flooding from the failed culvert. So the road was basically like a lake and they couldn't even get across. And there's one resident who's 6 months pregnant and understandably wants to be able to get to and from her house, to be able to access medical care. And so we were able to do some clearing after the first atmospheric river, but it flooded again in the second. And so we think that sort of a larger scale replacement is needed for that site as well. I also want to address Fife Creek. We did perform maintenance after the first atmospheric river to remove a number of sort of dams and blockages. But the creek, which to your point really is a straight jacket. It's like really more of a, it's been a channelized ditch since the development of the school and the road. Just doesn't have the capacity to handle that kind of a flashy storm. And so while we have been performing annual maintenance in the form of dredging, I totally agree that there's a need for a longer term, more holistic solution. And so actually, I think after the first atmospheric river, but before the second one, we had Department of Emergency Management get together with Sonoma Water to actually talk about applying for a federal grant to come up with a long-term plan. Because it feels like we're just continuing to Band-Aid and do small things, and that we need to have a bigger picture vision. And would love to work with you as an adjacent property owner if you have additional insight. And yes, and would love to work with Friends of Fife Creek as well, because you've done an awesome job on that lower stretch. So would love to have those conversations. And the other thing that I wanted to mention about Fife Creek is that actually we had in the middle of sort of the storm and the flooding, Department of Emergency Management fly a drone over the sort of stretch just to see, are there dams and blockages that formed after we cleared them? And it was very clear that the flooding was unrelated to any kind of dam or blockage. And it's just that, the sort of creek ditch is not adequate for the amount of water that comes down. So would love to brainstorm with everyone on a longer term solution. And we do have 2 county agencies working on that now. Another big impact, and I'm really excited about your tour of Riverbend, was we were very involved in our office in evacuating some low-lying RVs from Sycamore Court. And this is also something that we went through a year and a month ago. So, January of 2023, where some of our RV parks are really on top of it, and they have a location for everybody to go, and they help effectively evacuate their residents when the river is rising. Others really don't. And so then we end up sort of picking up the pieces and having to tow people at the last minute as the water's coming up and, get trash service in there so that trash doesn't float away down the river. And so one thing that we will be working on, I talked to the Department of Emergency Management and also the CAO about, is coming up with an ordinance for RV parks that will sort of mandate that they have evacuation plans and an ability to actually make that evacuation happen. And so there needs to be pre-planned sites of where folks go to, and a plan for how to get them there. Because, in one instance, we actually had a property manager just saying, well, it's not my problem, it's on you, and meanwhile, there are trailers that need to be evacuated or someone's, whole home will be ruined by floodwaters. So, so it's definitely an urgent situation and we need to come up with a better long-term plan. PG&E, funnily enough, I've heard so much about PG&E the last week. I will say that I have tremendous sympathy and gratitude for the linemen and linewomen who are out there in the rain, right? Trying to restore power, trying to make things safe. And I also have endless frustration with the higher ups and the bureaucracy, which is a nightmare. They kept telling us that within 24 hours, every single resident would have an estimated time of restoration posted. Meaning you would not go longer than 24 hours without power without knowing when it might come back on. As everyone knows, nobody had that. I kept getting emails saying that I would have it, typing in my address, and it would say to be determined. And then I would click on every single power outage I could find in West County, and they were all to be determined. So I exchanged some strongly but politely worded emails with PG&E repeatedly over the past several days about, you just need to give us information. If you don't have information, don't tell us you're going to give us information and then not give it to us. And then the other frustration was that we had the most people out in Sonoma County out of all of our neighboring counties. And in Sonoma County, West County was the part that had the most people out. And yet they stood up community resource centers in Lake and Napa counties.
Right.
And did not stand it up here. And so that's why West County Community Services opened up the senior center, which was helpful to have something. And we finally worked with them, but it was really our advocacy that got them to open up the community, which is kind of mind boggling. Like, wouldn't you think that if you're a company, you're going to go to the place that has the most pissed off people and try to get them something, as opposed to, I don't understand how they make their decisions. And similarly, we also have gotten way far fewer miles of undergrounded lines than our neighboring counties. They have undergrounded far more miles in Lake and Napa counties than they have in Sonoma. And so a brief update on power line undergrounding. PG&E hasn't been doing it. So actually the county has been trying to sort of advance this. And there are some funds that are set aside for this purpose. And we actually bought more of those funds from another county at like a discounted rate in order for us to undertake more undergrounding here in Sonoma County. Now, before I was on the Board of Supervisors and really before fire was a thing, there were already determined a couple of locations for undergrounding. And one of those was Freestone, and it was chosen, obviously not for fire risk because there aren't that many trees, but for sort of maintaining the heritage nature and look of the area. So that's actually going to be one of the first places in Sonoma County because this takes forever to do. It will be undergrounded, but the one that I highlighted that we are going to be using those funds that we purchased, sort of got a deal on, is actually in Forestville and looking at sort of Miraval, because that if that goes out, all of West County goes out and people crash into those poles all the time. And so a number of our sort of like major transformers being blown originated there. And so that's the one that we have prioritized in West County. But I totally agree that that's a drop in the bucket and PG&E needs to do more. But that's the start that we have. I also wanted to mention in terms of Lake Sonoma and the water supply. So that, you can monitor all of this data online, but I want to make sure everyone knows that the Army Corps was not releasing water when the river is at its height, right? They held it back. They are now releasing water, which is one of the reasons that the river has stayed more full, but they're trying to make sure that there is capacity in the lake to take more storms and to be able to, again, hold it back and not flood us when we're already potentially, at flood stage in a future storm.
Festival is happening this Saturday.
And it is, yeah, that's exciting. Steelhead Festival this Saturday. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, with respect to the Potter Valley project and the transfer of water, that has been going on for about 100 years. And so the goal is to sort of keep it going, but at a reduced rate. And it doesn't put more water directly into the lower Russian River. It fills Lake Sonoma. And then that is sort of released through Dry Creek. Through Dry Creek. But they're sort of, they need to then release it actually during the summer months in order to provide drinking water to Sonoma and Marin counties. So the water agency can actually fill up their ponds that then charge the wells for people to get their drinking water from. So it shouldn't contribute to flooding, but it's really sort of geared at, and it's gonna be less water than it has been in the past. And yes, Lake Pillsbury is likely to come down and no longer exist. So, and the other thing that I wanted to mention, just huge shout out to all of our first responders, firefighters, sheriff, CHP, roads crews. I mean, everyone did an amazing job. Yeah, we believe that thousands of trees fell in that storm, because there were actually hundreds that people responded to, you know, on structures. So, and we have a lot of trees that are in the middle of the forest, right? And so it was a very, very devastating event. And on the line of first responders, I did want to mention that I've been having conversations with the sheriff regarding his budget to the point about trying to stop the flow of drugs into the lower Russian River. And so they haven't had a narcotics unit since the recession. And so they actually don't have an ability to go after drug dealers. And I want to be clear, I believe that people who are addicted to drugs need to be provided resources to, you know, behavioral health support, help them. But I really want to go after the people who are profiting off of poverty and preying on those folks. And making a ton of money. And so I'm trying to work with the sheriff to try to bring back the narcotics unit, and it may or may not happen this year, but it's definitely on the plan. So I wanted to mention that as well.
Yay!
So, also wanted to mention, while PG&E has not been the most responsive, we have had a good relationship with Comcast. So please reach out to us if you have power, but no Comcast. Because if there are Comcast outages that are not associated with lack of power, we have someone who wants to help. Okay, great. Great, but is it just your power, because you have power on just your house, or? Okay, great, wonderful. So just wanted to flag that. That was a lot. I'm gonna just briefly touch on the other items that were mentioned in the agenda. We just gave direction on a community engagement plan policy for the county at a recent Board of Supervisors meeting. I really am trying to get department heads to do more of this, coming out and meeting with the community, so that before it gets to a meeting in Santa Rosa that happens in the middle of a work day that y'all can't attend. And so that's kind of one of the goals, and also to really focus on equity in that process and trying to hear from folks who have been traditionally marginalized and kind of left out of processes. We also held a forestry tour where we went, you know, actually around the lower Russian River and Occidental areas, and tried to bring together foresters and environmentalists with Permit Sonoma staff and myself and Supervisor James Gore to try to work on the tree protection ordinance. So I very much support the idea of a tree protection ordinance, and that storm just showed us why it's important that we get it right and that we allow people to cut down dangerous trees or trees that might fall into their home without sort of punishing them. And so it's really about creating appropriate exemptions for homeowners to keep themselves safe without having to go through a bunch of county bureaucracy.
And you're working with Forest Unlimited and
Yep.
groups like that.
Correct. Yep, we had Larry there, and Rick was not able to be there, but Larry was there, and we had Ruth Birch, and we had, I think Kimberly Burr. There were a good environmentalist contingent and good forest contingent.
Okay, we're in good hands, you guys, with that.
And it was actually amazing, because, you know, oftentimes those people are supposedly pitted against each other. By the end, it felt like we had some consensus, you know, or in a positive way. So we're hoping that we're headed in the right direction. Also wanted to mention that the unincorporated governance ad hoc committee on the Board of Supervisors, which is myself and Susan Gorin, brought an item before the board on Tuesday. And Supervisor Rabbit was absent, but the other two supervisors, Chris Corsi and James Gore, supported our effort and said that we should bring back all of the potential options during budget hearings. And so that includes things like creating an enhanced infrastructure financing district to finance big public works projects in unincorporated communities and also in cities. And a few other budgetary asks that would help us come to solutions for places like the lower Russian River. One of those solutions that is not a budgetary ask, but was also approved, was to support advocacy on better incorporation legislation at the state level, to make it easier for cities to incorporate. So that if at some point a community wants to incorporate, we pave the way and make it easier. So I wanted to mention that because I think that'll be relevant to another agenda item. And I think I covered most of the things. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let's open it up to questions for Supervisor Hopkins, council first. I have one, can I go? You talked a little bit about atmospheric rivers. There are predictions out there that they're gonna become more frequent and they are gonna happen sooner rather than later. I'm wondering if the county has thought about that particular issue of increase in frequency, how those atmospheric rivers actually impact roads, property, all of that. Because it could change how things are thought about in terms of what gets funded and what doesn't, because we know there's some damage gonna happen if we got a lot of rain in a short period of time.
Yeah. So we actually have a real asset that has come about from a partnership with Sonoma Water and Scripps Institute of Oceanography at UCSD. I'm trying to say this slowly for the interpreters, it's a lot. And so it's actually CW3E, the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, and they are really the national experts on atmospheric rivers. And so before this most recent one, I was able to receive a briefing from Marty Ralph, who's the head of that program. And a lot of the data is actually publicly available. If you type in CW3E, you can go and see videos of what's about to pummel, the West Coast. And I wanted to get you in that briefing next time. I will, Josh, fellow weather nerd in the corner. And so that has really been geared at how do we manage the reservoir in effective ways? Like, how can we make sure that we hold back water if we can, but we let it go if we know a big one is coming because we don't want to release it during a flood. And so that's also going to enable us to better predict what potential impacts could be to infrastructure, both short-term and long-term. The data is getting better and better because of Marty's advocacy. So this year they've already logged, I think, like hundreds of flight hours where they're actually like, how they fly planes into hurricanes on the East Coast? Well, he's got those planes now flying into atmospheric rivers over the Pacific to try to learn more. And so as that data gets better, as sort of long range forecasting and modeling gets better, we can definitely use that to guide our decisions. But that's one of the things I think about a lot with an enhanced infrastructure financing district, which maybe I can briefly describe. So everyone probably remembers redevelopment, right? It basically takes some of the property tax growth and reinvests it locally. So it's not new taxes, but it's taking future tax growth and then putting it in the community. An enhanced infrastructure financing district is kind of redevelopment 2.0, but it can be used for climate mitigation. And so if we want to do things like build new bridges instead of having temporary bridges in the lower Russian River, or install better culvert systems, like newly designed higher capacity culvert systems, like, that would be our opportunity. It would be kind of like a mini New Deal, right, for West County. And so that's something that I'm trying to work on at the board level. So, but I think that's what we need to do, because our existing infrastructure clearly inadequate, right? Need to actually, shore it up instead of just slapping the Band-Aids on.
Okay. Anyone else? Council have a question? Mr. Mike.
Quickly, Supervisor Hopkins, the last time you and I were in this room together was the eve of the 2017 storm.
Yeah.
And it was our first MAC meeting.
It was like literally starting to rain for our first MAC meeting, and then it was the big one.
Right. I do have a couple of points. First off, I think that I monitored Control 2 on Redcom during the height of the storm, and that was our only means of finding out what was going on. And quite frankly, I think that the female dispatcher deserves a bouquet of roses or something from West County, because she was absolutely amazing. She just was on top of it. She did not lose her cool, and she did a tremendous job. And I just feel that she needs to be really recognized for her hard work.
Mention her name again.
Pardon me?
Say her name again.
I don't know her name. All I know is that she was the dispatcher all day Sunday, but we can certainly find out who she was, and she was amazing.
So we will find out, and if everyone on the MAC is okay with this, you know, you maybe provide verbal direction that we can send it on behalf of West County and the Lower Russian River MAC, a thank you card and some flowers or some local
Sure,
goodies or.
absolutely. Sign me up for a donation. Secondly, you know, with PG&E, we all are concerned. We live in a rural situation with deep valleys, lots of trees and uninsulated power wires. And we know for a fact that we're not going to get undergrounding throughout the county. It just is not going to happen. So what we need to do is to push PG&E, especially in tier 3 and tier 2 high fire threat areas, to install insulated wires. We have uninsulated wires in Casadero. A squirrel will hit the wire or branch and we're out of power for 4 hours.
Squirrels in too.
Yeah, and the squirrel is fried.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, point being is that it takes 4 hours for PG&E to respond to Casadero. They have to inspect the lines before they turn the power back on. So if we had insulated wires, we certainly could produce that issue. As you well know, Supervisor, down in San Diego County, that's exactly what SDG&E did. And after the Cypress fires, and 75 or 80% of their lines are now insulated. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would also add that in Santa Cruz, apparently they're piloting like over the ground conduit,
Correct.
which I think is another, you know, potential opportunity for more main lines, you know, the sort of main ones that carry more of the power.
Well, they're doing it on
So-
primary lines in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Yeah.
The trial is going on.
Right, so it's a lot cheaper because you don't have to dig a trench, right?
Right.
And yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate
Yeah,
your.
totally agree. Oh, and I'm
presentation.
surprised you didn't bring up AT&T.
I was about to.
Okay. Sorry, I was telling Brian.
Someone else's issue, right?
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an issue, and I know that you already addressed it.
Do you want to share just so everyone, because I don't know if everyone's
So
aware.
the AT&T is, I don't know exactly what the date is for this, but they're threatening to discontinue being the carrier for the landlines, for anyone who has a landline. And I know that once they, if that's approved, that they no longer have to be the provider, there's not an enforcement for anyone else to step in and have to provide that service. So I know that you addressed it in your letter today, but do you want to elaborate on?
Yeah, so AT&T is trying to weasel its way out of being a carrier of last resort and having to provide landlines to folks who, you know, want them, which is a lot of people in rural areas who have no other backup form of communication. And so that we're trying to figure out when the CPUC hearing date is. We did work to send a letter on behalf of the Board of Supervisors signed by the chair of the board. I'm also going to reach out to fire chiefs to see if they would be willing to sign on to a letter that we're also having Jeff Duvall, our Department of Emergency Management Director, write. He also will definitely be there testifying at the hearing. And once we try to figure out when it is, I will try to be there to speak up as well. But you know, if that's, once we figure out the timing, if there is a MAC meeting before, or depending on the protocol, it might be really great to get the MAC to opine on that also. And to weigh in.
There is a public
The
hearing.
public meeting is in Ukiah,
Yeah, it's an online.
and it's on February 22nd.
Yeah.
Great, February.
It is not online, it's in person only.
Really?
Yeah.
It's listed on the Lower River Mac Facebook page.
Great. You guys are on it.
Betsy.
It is a, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say, there was a good article in the PD about this with an interactive map that you can go and see what areas they're planning to remove themselves from, which is pretty much everywhere in California. And certainly most of Sonoma County. They're just little tiny pockets that aren't on the map. And considering that our power was out, and I think power to our cell tower was out for the 4 days that we didn't have power, we had all I had was my landline. And I've kept my landline strictly for that purpose.
Yeah, the more that I'm learning about this, the more people I'm finding out actually do rely on their landline. I'm not one of those people, but there are a lot of people who do. Can we get a survey done? How many people are actually using their landline?
I think we have that information. I think you were saying that there's a map, right? Yeah.
Just one point on that, in the state of Nevada, AT&T did exactly the same thing. It was passed by the Nevada State Legislature in 2015. And they shut off the lines immediately.
Ooh,
And they left hundreds of people, thousands of people without any means of communication. They basically said, you can use a satellite or cell for connectivity. Well, cell towers, they didn't have cell tower connectivity throughout some of these rural areas. And it was just a real mess. So I expect Frontier to follow very shortly, pending AT&T's petition. And so we will have a similar situation from Cazadero, Timber Cove, Fort Ross, and up to Sea Ranch.
And the CPUC has not been particularly kind to citizens in any way, shape, or form, from my perspective.
Anyone else on the council? No, public.
I wanted to revisit the PG&E thing. I have a question for Mr. Nichols and for Supervisor Hopkins as well. So I'm just curious, why did you say that you think that it's not going to happen in terms of the burying of power lines? Like, why do you think that?
Their commitment is for 10,000 miles of power line undergrounding throughout the state of California.
Okay.
And 10,000 miles, Supervisor Hopkins aptly stated, Tulare County got something like 47 miles worth of undergrounding. Well, it's easier because it's sand over there. So PG&E picked the low hanging fruit. And so they were undergrounding in the areas that were easy to underground. Our areas where we have redwood trees, roots, granite rock and so forth, it just isn't going to happen. Especially in Cazadero, you know, we're at the end of the line. They are not going to focus on that. So that's why my comment on insulating lines is the next best thing, or utilizing the ground fault lines that we're talking about earlier.
Well, that's what I was thinking, and to pivot to
Excuse me, we have to keep moving along here.
Discussions with the council right now.
So any, on questions for Linda on something that she discussed?
I have a question on what she discussed. It was regarding.
Second topic.
I have a second question.
Oh, okay.
Maybe what we should do just for protocol is to give people their full 2 minutes and they can ask all the questions and then we can go back so that you don't get cut. So as long as you're with me, I think you're still with me.
I'm definitely.
Yeah.
Yes,
You're
for
good.
sure. So I was wondering if you'd reached out to the governor's office, because this was something that Gavin Newsom campaigned on, was undergrounding PG&E lines. So I'm wondering, has maybe the state could sue PG&E along with the county to get us more resources for this? And I'm just wondering if you did that.
I did not, but I would happily do so, although I will note, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but PG&E is one of his biggest campaign funders, and he has been very friendly to PG&E. And we have not really had luck with the state holding PG&E accountable. And actually, to Mike's point about the 10,000 miles, they're saying 10,000 miles, they've done like 100. Like out in the entire state. I mean, that's not the exact number, but that is order of magnitude. So they're making promises that they have no plan to actually execute. So like 10,000 would be great, even though it's a drop in the bucket for the state, but they're not even gonna hit that. Like I'd be surprised if they hit 1,000 statewide, right?
And that's
So
over 10 years.
And that's over 10 years, yeah. So anyway, but yeah, I would just say, yeah, oh, and I've met with the CPUC, I've gone down and met in their building in San Francisco, but we will definitely send a letter to the governor's office and yeah, can't hurt, can't hurt.
Which back meeting had PG&E was in October, it's all recorded.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was on.
So they presented in October, so it's on the YouTube channel for the Lower River Met.
Donovan?
Like their regional VP or something.
Does that 10,000 miles include replacement, or does that include new construction as well? Like, are they replacing lines, or does that mean all the new construction that's going on?
Excellent question. They have not defined that.
And meanwhile, they also can't hook up major affordable housing developments or hospitals because apparently they don't have staff to actually get electricity to things that are already built and are waiting for occupancy, but can't do that without power.
Anyone else?
My question is about Pipe Creek and the flooding that just recently happened in Sycamore Court and on the other side of Pipe Creek. And I am project manager for Friends of Pipe Creek Bridge to Bridge Project and Butterfly Garden Project. I am here at us. So we have a blockage, a major blockage that's up by the Corbell property off of Armstrong Woods Road in between the school and the Corbell property. Ross lives along Armstrong Woods Road and also knows about this blockage. Ernie Solo from the Russian River Keepers. I don't know why it wasn't mitigated by the Sonoma County Water Agency or whoever is doing the mitigation of the cleaning out of the creeks. It's huge though, it's huge. And it was diverting flood waters over to Sycamore Court and over the backside of Bike Creek Commons. So what do you know about that, Linda?
Yeah, I don't know anything about it, so if you have pictures that you can share with me. The problem is, and this is classic government, what the water agency is only responsible for a tiny fraction of the creeks in Sonoma County. And even of those creeks, they're only responsible for certain stretches. So if it's not in the stretch of creek that they're responsible for and allowed to clear, they might not be allowed to clear it. But I don't know where that is located, so if you send me an email or a text message, I will get it over to Sonoma Water and we can take a look at it.
Yeah, I'll work with Ernie Lonconsola from the River Keepers, Carol Shoemate and Ross.
Great. And sorry, I just broke the whole thing about,
Yeah.
my.
Yeah, we
My fault. My fault, sorry.
have a couple of meaty subjects we have to go on, move on. I think you had your hand up first, actually, but I'll get to that.
I had a comment and a question. My comment was that I got a thing from PG&E that's raising my bill so that they can do the underground lines. But beside that, Mike, what were you listening to during the storm that was giving you information?
GMRS radio, their program.
Jim was on, but I didn't hear anything. Was it?
It was on Channel 2.
Channel 2, okay.
So it says, not Channel 2, but it's Redcom Control 2, which is on your radio, probably Channel 91.
Channel 91.
Yeah. So I always have my radio set on Control 2, so I know what's going on with the fire departments
Control.
and dispatch.
Figure that out again.
Besto?
Yeah, somewhere in the last 20 years, Private Sonoma did a presentation out in Bodega Bay on climate change and sea level rise. And one of the questions at the time, because during high tides, it's supposed to flood all the way back to Girdwood Park, which is astonishing. And at the time we asked, are they changing their building codes to raise buildings above the current levels into the climate change sea level rise levels? And each time I've asked that, they said, no, they have not changed the building codes yet. So buildings are still being built at the current levels, but not at the future levels. Do you know when the permits know what's going to change their building code in order to prevent future disasters or floods?
Great question. So we are launching the general plan update process this year, and for the first time, it will have a climate change element. And so I think that would be a great place to look. We did really work to incorporate climate change on the coast in terms of sea level rise, but I have seen those maps, and I think they're still on a website somewhere where you can click and you can say, here's 6 feet of sea level rise plus a storm. Oh wow, look at everything go underwater. And so that's the kind of data that we need to use to, look at zoning in the future. The general plan update will also include a refresh and update of the Lower Russian River specific area plan, and that would be another good place to look at those kinds of issues. But I think that's kind of along the lines of what Kip was saying about how do we plan for the future? We need to start thinking that kind of long term.
Tracy, do we have anyone with their hands up on the line?
We do. Sheila has her hand raised. Please unmute to speak.
Hi, my insurance actually didn't renew, and having going through the gambit, I'm going to have to go and do the FAIR California plan. But it was interesting in my conversations, one of the flags that they have in insuring properties is if your house is on a stilts, which I'm like, that's kind of required where I live. So I thought that was an interesting perspective that the insurers are taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. I don't see any other hands raised.
And our chair has stepped out for the moment. Mike, are you vice chair? Okay, great.
All righty, thank you very much, Supervisor. Appreciate your comments and the comments of the audience. It's gratifying to see somebody here at a MAC meeting. We've had kind of sparse attendance over the past few months, but it's good to see that everyone's here. All right. So the next item on our agenda is the Lower Russian River Governance Study Location discussion. And this is going to be a discussion on the third and final Blue Sky Governance Community Meeting held on January 27th at the Gridville School, and how the MAC will be involved in ongoing community initiatives related to governance solutions. The council will deliberate on steps forward based on community input and discussions in the meeting. The written summary and audio recording of the meeting are available on Lower Russian River MAC website for reference and further community engagement. So we're ready to open this conversation up, and our chair is back, so.
Sorry.
I relinquish my comments, so we're on item number 8.
Okay, governance study. So the purpose of this section is really for us all to decide how the MAC wants to engage in this process. And there's like 20 different ways that we could possibly do that. One way is we can do just a couple, and I'd like everyone's ideas on this. One way is that we could schedule every other month, we are going to have a governance study section on the MAC where we discuss different topics, get feedback from people. We can also, and to do that, that does impact, excuse me, our agendas, right, going forward. There's going to be some stuff that we're going to have to give on if we're going to do that. The other thing is we can encourage every MAC member here to have town halls in their own districts. It's for folks to come out and answer questions, which is another good way to get input and engage more people in the community. I just want to make sure we get as many people involved in the process as we possibly can, so we get a better solution at the end. So with that, any council member have any comments or thoughts on this particular subject? Joe?
One of the things that concerns me is the dialogue that's going on online right now. And we don't need to mirror national politics here. You know, we can really have an honest conversation and hold an element of trust. One of the things that's standing in the way of that trust is this disparity in numbers. So we talked about TOT at the governance meeting, and people didn't trust the study to come up with honest numbers and quoted other numbers. So I think it's really critical to make a good decision that everybody understands the reality. How can we make a decision without knowing who to trust and what to believe and how much money is there? So I would encourage us to find a way to mediate some kind of forum or do something to get everything on the table and get to some clarity and mutual agreement in order to be able to move forward.
Anyone else on the council?
Well, it seems to me, as I hear you talking about it, it almost sounds like something is a foregone conclusion. We may not be sure exactly what, but, you know, we're saying, that we want to continue to talk about this and come up with the best plan possible, whatever. And I have actually only had one person express any enthusiasm for this project to me. So I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, I apologize if I made it sound like
Government.
I apologize if I made it sound like it was a foregone conclusion that something's gonna happen, because we can decide nothing's gonna happen, right? And just leave things the way they are as well. I just want to make sure that this is an important topic that's relevant right now to us, that could impact how things work, from infrastructure, money being part of this to other things, security. I just we're here, we're the natural place, the conduit for a lot of information to come into us and out from us. And also, we all have a lot of networks amongst ourselves that we can find out what people are thinking. And to Joe's point, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think that the discussion has become about incorporation or not incorporation, and there's 20 different things in between. And we can help dispel that myth that it's not that. And it's not Supervisor Hopkins or the Board of Supervisors. They have some idea in their head how it should go, and that's what we're gonna do. I mean, we don't have to do any of it, or we can do something, but discussions should happen. People should have input into this, and maybe we actually can come together as a community and get something, whether it's small or big, that everyone gets behind. To Joe's point, we don't have to mirror, national politics. We can, as long as we all work together and share information, share facts where we can get them. And so I think it's important for us to engage, and we are a good place to get more involvement than any other place out here in the West County right now, at least in the Lower Russian. Betsy.
I think we also have to keep in mind that the governance, that the meetings over the past year, has it been a year? Almost a year, is step one. And this is not, this is a marathon. This is not gonna happen next week. It's not gonna happen next year. And the process to either incorporate, put together a special district, change the MAC into something different or more. These are all things that the whole community can be involved in step by step, not, this isn't, I just want to, it's another situation where people think that something's gonna happen tomorrow.
Right.
And it's not. It's like the asphalt plant is not gonna be built tomorrow. And there's a process involved. So it'd be important for us, I think, to keep the community aware of what's happening along the line.
And keep the momentum going.
Yes.
Right? So this could fall off the radar if this particular body does not engage in some way to keep people talking about this.
And
This
I'm
is
not,
the first time I knew that there was even a in-person meeting of the MAC. And you've been doing this for a year?
Oh, yeah, we're on council right now. We can.
What?
We're on the council right now. We'll get, yeah. She's
Sorry.
I think it's also important for people to recognize that this was only sort of, I mean, it was talked about, the consultants talked about it, but I'm not sure that it was heard by the community that there's voting involved in this.
Yeah.
There are decisions made by the voters, and that's another whole process, putting something on a ballot. That costs money.
Right.
Vicky reminded us that, Vicky's the rep for Hacienda.
Can you refresh?
Sorry. Vicky reminded us that might be a good time to put together an ad hoc on this topic to explore. So it's gonna be my question. How to approach it.
And that's an option.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that to explore what? Oh, okay.
An ad hoc.
An ad hoc is a temporary committee created, with a maximum of 4 members of the MAC
And community volunteers.
Yeah.
and community volunteers.
Anyone else have a thought, opinion? I mean, anything?
Yeah, like Betsy just mentioned, there's a lot of options on the table. It's basically a menu that the community has. And I think what the first logical step is to figure out what is there an appetite for and where, before we go down the road of feasibility and things like that. So is the appetite for incorporation, is it for a special district? Is it for something smaller than that? Is there appetite for making several districts that do different things in different parts of the Lower Rush River? I've heard mention of that. So I think the logical first step, like you said, is to figure out what is the community interested in? Because if the community is not at all interested in incorporation, we shouldn't spend any time talking about that. So I think however that's done, whether that's through town halls or a survey or what, I think that's, to me, the logical first step is figure out what are people interested in and what are they definitely not interested in, so that we can narrow what we're even talking about.
And I think education about the different ways that this can happen is important too.
Well, because I think there's going to be a variety of interests within the community. There's not going to be one idea that people agree on, and part of that decision-making process is going to be more information that's needed to make the most informed choice.
Yep.
So it's on the MAC, are we trying to just enable different advocacy groups within the community that have opinions about what should happen, and kind of collecting those opinions and reflecting them to the broader community? Because I imagine the goal of the MAC is to not have a specific opinion, but to engage with people in the community that have joined together around, you know, like this group wants incorporation if these certain things are met, and this group wants the MAC to have more power, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just thinking about how do we organize around multiple opinions.
I agree, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, the MAC can have an opinion. We can have a formal opinion. I think we're not close to that right now. But we could at the end of this, but I do think that there's a whole bunch of stuff from education to engagement to getting people involved. I know I go to my group of people in Rio Nito, we had 55 people at our last meeting, and we talk about this. I mean, that could be the topic of our March meeting that we have here. We can get a lot of people there, and you can have actual civilized discussions. And people exchanging ideas without a lot of yelling back and forth. And I think that's really healthy.
I really, you mentioned a survey, and I think inclusion of the entire community would require a survey, because there are so many people who cannot attend public meetings. People with children, people who have seniors, people who are homebound, whatever. It would be very nice that if the entire community was surveyed about, you know, once we figure out what that menu is, to see what people are interested in.
How do we make sure that each community has equal say in what they'd like to do? I mean, is that what an ad hoc would do, is go into the community individually and solicit that information?
I think that'd be part of the survey. I mean, where are you, and what are you interested in moving forward?
Yeah, or we could, we could do this in chunks. I mean, we could say for the next 3 months, the MAC is each one of us is gonna do something in their own area, talk to people, educate people, and then bring that feedback to the MAC, and we can figure out the next step from there. So there's lots of different ways that you can chop this up or do it. But I'm a firm believer that we need to involve as many people as we can in this process. The more people that we have, the better ideas we may end up having, and the more receptivity to whatever the solution is at the end. Not everyone's gonna be happy, we know that. But if everyone knows that we are trying to get feedback and provide information, that's a good first step.
Well, I support your comment on MAC members actually reaching out in communities with town hall. This is one way to begin the gathering of information. But I also support an ad hoc, so.
But tell me what the ad hoc's purpose is.
I think it's, we should focus on one theme for perhaps a month or two. Have the ad hoc report back to the MAC, and then determine what the next step would be. It would be up to the consensus of the group to figure out what the first focus should be encompassed by the ad hoc.
Okay. Right. Okay. Anyone else on council?
Just that the ad hoc can also kind of be a clearinghouse for information. So who's gonna read those surveys? Who's gonna compile that information? Who's gonna get all the reports from all the community meetings, et cetera?
Right, and figure out, is it appropriate for District 5 to do that? Is it not? What can they do? What can they, I mean, yeah, so there's. Anyone else on council? I'm gonna open up to the public then.
So when I first lived up here in the nineties, there was a lot of conversation about incorporation, different theories. And now I'm here again, I've been here almost 6 years, and when I first moved back, I was really, I was pretty gung ho about the idea of incorporation. And as I become aware of more of the options, I want to hear more about the options. I don't feel any need to rush into this whatsoever. And as Betsy points out, this will ultimately have to come to a vote. But I wouldn't trust myself or any of my neighbors or any of you to make that vote right now, because we haven't had that really full examination of what all of these options are. So when you talk about the menu, yeah, we need to know what's on the menu. We also need to know what the ingredients are for each one of those, because some of us have allergies. So let's get clarity out there. And I will say that I am disturbed by some of the entrenched and mean stuff that's going on, to what you spoke about, Joe. That I don't.
Can I interrupt real quick? The interpreters are asking for, people who are making public comment to maybe come stand right up here next to Cynthia. This is our microphone and the interpreters can't hear you. And we have 14 people online.
Yes, so I think that
A little bit, this,
Next to Cynthia.
right up next to Cynthia, right there, is good, yeah, perfect. That's, anybody who's gonna speak, will stand in that.
I feel like I've been called up by the principal.
We just really want to hear you.
So I just think the most important role that all of you can do, and I appreciate the amount of time you've already put into it and continue to put into it, is to just really be diligent and vigorous about getting out all this information, because I hear the most wackadoodle stuff out there from people, and I know it's not true. So, and to maintain that civility, we're one community, we go through floods and fires and all the challenges. This matters, there's no clock ticking, let's do it right. And I would hope that if it gets on the ballot, that whichever way it goes overwhelmingly and resoundingly in that direction, because we're all informed and are actually on the same page. Thank you.
Basically,
Hold on, Philip.
yeah, second what Cleveland said, and I think Spencer says that informed opinion is useful, uninformed opinion is not very useful. So way before we start, and I'm very curious as to how people feel, and way before we start asking opinions, we need to get the information out there. I think the only people that have that information are the ones who've been attending those governance meetings, which was about 100 at the last one, but thousands of people from the online chatter really don't understand what's going on. So I think Joe's idea of getting the financial information, which personally, doesn't matter much to me, but does matter to a lot of people apparently. So I think getting that clear first is very important. And listing the options clearly, as was said, with what are the pluses and minuses, so people get the range of options, with incorporation mentioned last, not first, because you don't want that to be one of options, but if it's, as soon as you mention that, they stop hearing everything else. So put that at the very end. And so I think it needs a real educational, informational effort first, before we even think about going to polling or surveying or anything like that. Make sure the community really understands what the range of options is and what they entail, and then start polling and surveying to see what levels of support there really are or aren't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nick.
Is this loud enough if I speak?
No, you have to
Maybe
stand
you have
up.
to
I think I want to just second the importance of an ad hoc. And not just because I think that MAC isn't necessarily capable of doing this, but I think this presents a very, very big level of work. And even if we think about this meeting today, this is only a half an hour worth of the discussion. So just based on the bandwidth of the other things that you guys have to do, the fact that we're very limited by the Brown Act and it prevents people from being able to talk for certain amounts of time, there are a lot of limitations to the MAC that I think are not conducive to be able to creating really, really well thought out, well incorporated presentations or options for people. And so without discrediting the MAC, I think, we do need some sort of a body or a group that is inherently not biased or does not have an opinion on this. If the MAC wants to form an opinion on this, that's great, and other interest groups should be able to too, but we need some sort of a forum that is implicitly unbiased in order for us to make a decision. We also need people that are sort of specialized and have the time and effort towards this, because this will always be on the back burner. This will be on the back burner for 1,000 more years. If we're just like, tomorrow, like we need people to define the menu and articulate what the actual options are, and that's gonna take resources, time, effort, energy, and I don't know the MAC has that resources, time, effort, energy, and if it does, maybe I'm wrong, but I think an ad hoc formed with MAC members and other people in the community that have expertise and resources is gonna be the best way to move the ball forward.
And can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
So I'm struggling with the ad hoc a little bit, not because I don't want to do one, but to give it a specific purpose and what it's doing. And it could be a short-term ad hoc that does one thing at one time, and then we can switch that.
Yeah.
So what in your head do you envision the ad hoc being responsible? Because we have to be very specific about what it does.
Without having thought about this at all, I
Yeah.
can name easily 3 things. One would be about the actual articulation of the options, making sure that the county presented us with 3 different options. None of us have any idea whether or not it's banana, apple, and like, we have no clue. So articulation of the options, engagement from the community. So making sure that people are actually involved in this process and know how to better participate in the actual thing. And then finally would be education and engagement in the ultimate decision-making process. So teaching people what does this look like at the end? How do we vote? Like what does the road ahead of us actually mean? And I think an ad hoc committee, again, I'm just making this shit up on the fly, but an ad hoc committee having those 3 pillars would be hugely beneficial for us being able to see what the path forward actually looks like. And I truly just think that is so much work. And I think it's gonna take a lot of time and dedication that the council as it currently exists may just not have. So that's.
I just have one, so awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely been a great conversation. One thing that I want to add is that we as sort of the 5th district team would be happy to provide resources. And so I want to be really clear, this is not our process. We do not in any way, shape, or form want to dictate the outcome. That is all on you. But if, for instance, the MAC were to form an ad hoc, and I agree, it could be challenging, like with the MAC format, they have other things that they want to discuss. But if you had an ad hoc, the ad hoc could report out at each board meeting what had happened. And for instance, if the ad hoc were to ask, hey, could you hire a facilitator to help run the meetings or to put out a survey? Those are the kinds of things that we can fund. I just want to make sure that it's not coming from us, right? Like we don't want to facilitate the meetings, but if you want to hire someone external to help you guys, because it's going to take a lot of time and energy from volunteers. So having someone that you hire who just gets the meeting on the calendar, takes notes, sends those meeting notes out, sets an agenda, does all of that work, I think could be really valuable. And we do have, again, impartial facilitators on contract at the county that we could look for tourism impact funds or community infrastructure funds or whatever to fund that kind of an effort to support an ad hoc, to meet with the community, to put out more surveys, to get more information, whatever it is. So I just want to throw that out that like, we are happy to provide resources. We just don't want to own the process because that ruins the process, right? Like the process needs to be your process, but if you need stuff to make the process happen, that's where we can.
And I follow on that just for 2 seconds. That I think is a big thing that I think we should all think about too, is this having a little bit of distance from the county is actually going to be really important for this. Like, this is our opportunity as a community to show that we know how to lead and to be able to start forming our own types of structures, right? This is almost like baby training wheels for this process. And so I think an ad hoc where we get to design our own process and design sort of the regulations around it creates the right amount of distance, rebranded as autonomy that we need to be able to make this process run the way this community wants it to run.
Okay,
Nice.
go ahead.
Should I come up?
Yeah, you gotta come up.
Yeah. All right. So I'm afraid I'm going to make this more complicated, but governance options I feel are a means to an end. So
I think one of the roles of stewarding this process is where the MAC should look at, where do we want to go? So we're looking at how do we get there, right? But are we thinking about what's the end state vision? Where do we want to be? What does the community consider to be a vision for where we want to be once we have something in place? And I know that at the workshop, there was a great list of community concerns that were put out there. And I think that could be the basis of a bigger conversation of where will this governance structure that we want to get to bring us? I mean, what is the best way to get to the place? I mean, we're talking about means to an end, but what is the end? That's my only thought on this.
Donovan?
I think.
Owl.
What's that?
You gotta go up there.
Go up.
Loud
office.
So I think this is all great that we're talking about this, and my gallery is like on the corner of Armstrong and Main. And almost every day, there's a woman who walks by, and I think her name's Raina or Ro, something like that. And maybe a lot of you guys have seen her. She has writing on her face, and you know, she kind of walks around barefoot. Well, she gets raped probably about once a week. She lost her baby on the street. And it's just this ongoing cycle. So this is happening in our community, on our streets. And I know that we're having this conversation, but while we're having this conversation, nothing's being done for her, for our community. So time is of the essence for her, for us. I mean, people don't like to see it. So
How does this relate to the governance?
Because I think in the governance, we need some sort of control and representation. People need to know this is happening here. We need some representation so that people can understand that our little square, which is quite cool actually, is being overtaken, and this type of behavior is happening literally in our park.
Yeah.
So if we can't get people to pay attention, then we need to like take control of it ourselves. That's just my thought.
Thanks. Thank you. That's good. That's that.
I think one of the hardest parts about the governance of all the three workshops was that people formed opinions outside of ever reading Blue Sky's report. I would love to have seen copies of Blue Sky's report at that meeting. So even though I put it out on Facebook and Nextdoor, please print it out, read it. It's 30 pages long, 2 sides, 15 pieces of paper stapled together. The conclusions, their research was excellent. Their conclusions were laid out very carefully, and their suggestion about what we should do was laid out very clearly. But it's like nobody read it, nobody saw it. They just came with their preconceived notions of what they thought this was about. And one of the most difficult parts is people keep going, incorporate Guerneville, incorporate Forestville. But right in the report, it says incorporate the lower Russian River because it has enough population as a tax base. And you can't do any of these things without a tax base. And they were very clear in the report that you had to have the community had to take on responsibility for everything. Who was going to be the mayor, et cetera, if you started at the full end of incorporation. But they suggested we start with a Lower River MAC governance committee, which in essence would be ad hoc start, number one, research it. What would it be like if you funded the Lower River MAC's governance committee? To learn what to do. And then the next ones, a lot of people said, oh, community service districts. What is a community service district? And that's defined to a certain extent in this report, but it needs more. So what you're talking about is education, and like what Philip says, there's too much ignorance, there's not enough education. And one of the biggest pieces of the education, aside from just knowing what all these things mean, is everybody becomes responsible. If the more you move towards incorporation, the more every person in this room is responsible for the budget and for the outcome of everything. So I think it was in Blue Sky's report, they even talked, we had a major flood, and guess who's responsible? Us. We're not going to the Board of Supervisors to pay for it. So ad hoc, I think, is a great idea to start with the education process. and then move on up there ever so slowly, incrementally, and it can be reported every month, and I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I also think, it's important, and you kind of touched on it. I don't think an ad hoc, I agree with, these MAC meetings are not a great place for longer discussions. But I do believe that each one of us on the council can have meetings. We're not bound by Brown Act. We're not bound by anything except educating our communities about stuff and bringing people, we can bring people in to educate more, whether we ask, can we get Blue Sky to come out, or can Debbie or Linda or Tracy or someone come to our meetings? We can have long discussions then. So we can do both, I think. Yep.
Slide through here. 2 weeks ago, I didn't know anything about this. I saw something go through next door and it was there and it was gone. And I ended up going to the governance committee thing and was shocked about what was going on that I didn't know anything about. And no way to learn it. How do you get it out to these people? And I think that's really important. And part of it is what everyone else is saying is the education, but you have to remember the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, because I found for my own business that I always have to deal with the lowest common denominator. So like my suggestion would be, they put up a thing, said, you know, you have a MAC and then this, and then a community service district, and then incorporation. Well, which of each of these, your pro, what it means. You have this is what this means. You have this is what this means. 15, 30 pages, they're not gonna read that. You know, you've gotta think about how to get the minimum amount to educate the masses. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about the MAC. I did put it on the GMRS on Wednesday night so that other people would hear about it because, and that was your website. I saw that go through and then it was gone. I was gonna tell you, keep putting it up.
Yeah, that's the plan. I'll make updates there, yeah.
I'm just walking across. So I just like to kind of reiterate a couple of points that have already been made here that I think it's really important. One is that we do need to find out what is really our end game here. Because when I think about how did we get to this point in the first place, if we've been having a discussion about incorporation, it's because we see certain issues on the street. And we keep on hearing about law enforcement and the issues of law enforcement, or maybe it's crash pickup. I mean, we seem to have a certain set of issues that we're trying to tackle. And if you kind of look at it from that lens, you may or may not really want to end up being incorporated. You may want a CSD that can do this. Maybe if we do a CSD, maybe we can do it more efficiently than somebody else can, is the other way we've got to look at it. So I think we do want to go ahead and start looking at the ends equals the means, and then kind of define better what of the options that we have fit best to get to that point. Number two. Number three is, depending on what that solution is, it may be that we end up with a CSD. And we say right now, it's a general purpose CSD. And for right now, all we want to do is contract law enforcement so we have more control. Or it may be, hey, we just want to get funding from the county and we want to administer cleanup funds in the way that we see better fit. So I would really, before kind of having an ad hoc committee that would help put that together in a way that we can say a little more objectively, here are the facts, here's what we really want to accomplish, here's how we might want to do it as a local group with input, because I really do like your concept of town halls and having members of an ad hoc kind of go and do town halls. And then that way members of the regular MAC, we don't have to worry about Brown Act and all that kind of stuff. But I do think it's important that that is one of the things that are regular, i.e. every meeting to meet, report back, what are we doing, how are we getting there? Let's keep it up in front of the entire MAC, because the other big piece that we're going to have to define if we take any of these actions is what is, we go to CSD, where's the CSD? I mean, I read really loud and clear on social media, hey, Cavs is different than Burnville is different than Forest Hills, right? So we may want to do it. So yes, I will be good.
Thank you. Oh, I can do, I'm gonna do that from now. I'm just gonna point to the line so I don't say sounds. And it's on governance.
Yes, actually, in the governance.
You have to stand up.
Okay, so in the governance study then, and like a way to evaluate it, did they build in like another stream of revenue perhaps, like growth, economic growth and the ability for us to, and like, for instance, my gallery is really interested in creating an artist, a heavier artist community, so there's another stream of revenue built in. So if the governance is basing its study on today, that's fine, but if there's an investment in the community, then the tax base will grow, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So it was that investigated at all? I'm sorry, to Vesta's point, I didn't read it, so.
It was.
And look, we live.
I just had one quick point. Are you talking about an arts district?
Well, I mean, that was just an example.
Okay.
Like, if we invest in the community, then we can build another stream of revenue.
Yeah, and that's.
To expand.
And that's something
tax
through
base.
GDP through Freedom Sonoma.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I don't think it was investigated, but it was talked about. Like say, for example, one of our biggest tax bases was going to be vacation rentals. And so that's been part of the big discussion about governance is if we lose that, we lose tax money, and therefore we've been talking about strategizing and say diversify the economy to different tourism, arts, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that would give us also our own way of doing it at that time.
Right, I don't want to make it a back and forth, though, just really quick to follow up on that. Like, I was listening to some winemaker talk that they're gonna start moving grape growing out to the coast to accommodate for the climate change. So I was thinking that's obviously gonna spur some growth for us and then obviously affect the governance.
They can find the land to do it, yeah.
Anyone else on governance or how? Phil?
Pick it up again, but, on getting the word out, that came up at the governance meeting too, and people saying they don't hear about meetings, and I think we got overly reliant on electronic social media and forgotten about hard copy and paper, and I do a lot of PR, and I like it best when you ask people, how do you hear about this? They say it's everywhere. And where they're just hearing from so many sources that they don't know which source they heard it from. And one way to do that, and I do a lot of social media stuff, and then people say, I never heard about that. How come I didn't hear it? It's like, put it on 30 different sites and Facebook groups, and still you didn't hear about it. And that came with governance too. And so if we're gonna do an informational campaign or anything like that, or have meetings, don't forget about just papering the town, papering the area, whatever, posters, flyers, whatever, because some people just aren't responsive or reactive or engaging with electronic media. And if you want to be seen as really not being hidden away and reclusive or doing governance thing in secret, it's like, it's gotta be out there. So you can point to posters on the walls and everywhere and say, hey, it's right there. If you didn't see it, that's not our fault. We plastered the place with the information. So make it just everywhere.
Right, thanks. Anyone else? Tracy, anyone have their hands up?
I'm not seeing any hands raised online.
I got a couple of themes here. I haven't put it all together, but the education part was extremely critical, and I couldn't agree with that more. Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah.
Point that you
Huge.
talked about? More feedback than what we're currently getting from more people.
Education and engagement.
What's that?
Education and engagement.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Also, how to keep momentum going and keep a central, like, maybe the MEC is the central body for that information to be housed. Whether it's a written report every month or every other month. I didn't hear, and this was my idea originally, and maybe we don't need it, is to have this officially on the agenda, like it could be every third month or every second month. So it's a placeholder to discuss this.
Well, what I was trying to get at is if we do end up doing it ad hoc, that would, by virtue of having the ad hoc, would make this.
Yeah.
I think this needs to stay regularly with the MAC itself.
Yep.
I think the MAC is important.
Okay.
I just, I'll get up and stand. I go, I'm relatively new. I keep saying this every time I come to talk, but I've been trying to understand, and I'm still not sure why there seems to be such disenfranchisement with West County. I've spoken with a lot of people in the sheriff's office, including rank and file deputies. I tried to reach out to Supervisor Hopkins' office, and again, I still have not gotten a call back. I have spoken with leaders, business owners, and I still don't get it. So I've really done my due diligence. I've read the report. It seemed a bit self-fulfilling in terms of the fact that it was a government-sponsored study. So, I think to your point, what you're hearing online is that people feel disenfranchised and don't know where to direct that. That's the problem. So, as near as I can tell, we are underrepresented at the Board of Supervisors level, with all due respect to Supervisor Hopkins. It's too big of an area. We need more supervisors representing this area. And it's really a funding issue, the way that I see it. So you're talking about incorporation versus non-incorporation. Okay, we can solve these issues, whether it's at the county level or at the local level, but who's going to pay for it? Sonoma County is one of the wealthiest counties in California. This is not a resource issue. It's a resource allocation issue. And that seems to be the one thing that nobody's really discussing. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
I put in, and I still haven't heard you.
Tracy called you back.
I didn't get a call, nor was.
Okay,
I'll give
can we get a motion?
On July 13th and July 19th, you were back. We have records of calling you back.
And I
And
asked,
speaking with you.
and I requested to speak to you, and I was told no. And I invited you to this slide. All
right.
With me and my name.
Hello. Hello, we're gonna move on. So I'm gonna summarize what I think, and disagree with me, what the ad hoc should be. I think for right now, maybe it's a very shorter term one. Maybe it's a month ad hoc to do a couple things. Figure out what the best way on education and feedback could be, how to keep momentum, how to keep people informed, and what role the ad hoc would have moving past that time, and then we can reappoint the same one or add it.
At
Just
the
add
correct
on.
timing that I can still say something.
You gotta hold for a sec. Sorry, I'll get you, I swear. Council members, any feedback on that?
What was the thing about being a month?
Like it could be, I threw a month out there, but I think maybe it's shorter term, figure out, we know it's education and feedback, right? We know it's how to keep momentum. We know it's about like getting community input, right? So maybe the first step is to figure out how the ad hoc is gonna do all that stuff, report back to the MAC. And there could be, because we're all new to this, right? There could be something new that you all, whoever's on the ad hoc might think, then we can reevaluate what the ad hoc is.
Got it, because it has to have a very specific function.
Correct.
You could-
Correct, and I don't feel that comfortable laying it down that specifically right now, because it could be something else. That's just my 2 cents.
Nice for clarification.
And go ahead.
Two things. One, we have Lisa Nominson with her hand up.
Okay.
So she might want to weigh in. And also, I just wanted to remind you or let you know that we're still taking feedback on the draft report until March 1st. So the first part of this ad hoc, you're not gonna have a complete report, but part of what that ad hoc could do is get the word out so that people can provide input so that it will be included in the final report. If there are community members that don't know about it, that could be part of the efforts. But I just wanted to
Okay.
let you
Can I
know.
ask, is that input gonna change the report or is it just gonna change commentary on the report?
I think it would just add, I don't think it's gonna change anything that's in it, just. For example, somebody suggested, have you thought of a business improvement district? So that'll go in there as another option, so it's just, it'll flesh it out a little bit.
But just to push back a little bit on that, I mean, I don't think what we need to do has to go into the report. I think the most important thing that we can do is get people involved, educate them, and get feedback. Whether it goes in that report or into another, I don't, unless you guys tell me that it does matter.
No, just, you'll wanna start sharing that report, and Vesta was
Yeah.
talking about how, people don't have it, why haven't we printed it out? But it's still in draft form, and there is still an opportunity to engage, that's all I'm saying,
Okay.
but it's not gonna change that much.
You said March 1st?
Yes.
Until March 1st, yes.
So can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Is the ad hoc going to be planning on how to address those three areas? Because that would be what I would envision them doing.
Yes, and that's the point, and that's why it's sort of a short time thing, and then we can reevaluate.
They come with a plan, here's how we're gonna do engagement and education, here's how we're gonna do,
Right.
yes.
And I think parallel to that, we can all start scheduling meetings in our own communities. Right, and then to get information out as well. I think those two things can parallel.
Awesome.
And hold it, I'm still on council.
Oh, sorry.
Anyone else? All right, and Meg,
We need a definition of where.
so the purpose of the short-term ad hoc, what do you guys think? 1 month, 2 months?
A quarter.
I think it's gonna take at least 2 months.
Okay, for 2 months, is, an emphasis on education and feedback and how to best do that in the community. How to keep momentum
Engagement.
and engagement. And those are the three primary pillars of this thing. You all go back and think about it, you come back and talk about what you've discovered and talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Communication.
I move that we form an ad hoc. That will create education, feedback, and engagement
Plans.
and plans.
Does anyone
Planning.
have a second? There's a second. Can we take do we want hands or
We can do hands.
all in favor, council, raise your hands? Okay, that's the ad hoc forum. Now who wants to do it?
We have some excellent members here that are not in current committees, so.
Pardon?
Community members?
Yes, there can be.
It goes into, did you guys, do you need to do your vote first?
Yeah.
Or do you vote?
And then the second part of that is who wants to be part of this ad hoc on council, up to 4 people.
Could I be on it if my husband was a community member on that?
No.
Okay.
We did talk about that and it gets a little sketchy, like Donovan couldn't be on.
I'm happy to be on it.
Okay, it's one. Betsy? Joe?
I will mention I cannot meet during the day.
Okay,
I have a full-time job.
okay. So that's three people, which is great for an ad hoc for us. Does anyone out there or online?
We have Patty Thayer with her hand up.
Okay, Patty, so Patty.
I don't know if she just wants to talk.
Oh.
She has her hand up.
Go ahead, Patty, I'm sorry, I can't see.
And we also have Lisa who's had her hand up for a little bit, so, Tracy, do you wanna let the online?
Yes, sorry. Lisa? Please unmute.
Hi, everyone. I was throwing my hand up for the ad hoc, but it seems like you have 4. So maybe on the next round, I would do it.
We have three.
We have 3, but we don't know what Patty's gonna say.
Yeah.
Right. We don't know what Patty's going to say exactly, but I'm available. But I'm not physically available if we're walking around to meetings, but I have been to a fair number of meetings virtually, including I was at the FPA meeting, Forestville Planning the other day, and, everyone there is has interest and also confusion. So I'm happy to do it if Patty doesn't want to do it.
Patty?
I would very much like to do it. I'd also like to make sure that if not in this first session and the next ad hoc, we delve into what Joe and others have said about verifying and providing trust about the data and the information on which these decisions will be made. I'm happy to help this one, the next one, just let me know.
Okay, great. So it sounds like Patty, you might be best for this since you're physically here. I mean, I do think this is gonna take face-to-face with community to get this rolling. My opinion. Anyone in the community want to be the community? Like, look at all those hands. How many can we have?
Super.
For community members, I think for an ad hoc, it should be one community member.
Okay.
But I could double check with council on that.
That doesn't mean you guys are not included, but.
Yeah, no, I think I can chime in. So, the ad hoc phrase really just sort of applies to the members of the committee. Because we've done this, you know, on the board of supervisors, and then you can invite community members and hold open meetings as part of that, which might be the best thing for transparency's sake.
Okay.
But, you know, identifying a core group of people that can then help get the word out to the community would be important. So I would say if there are folks who, you know, basically commit to attending all of the meetings and being part of that core group, and then the ad hoc can also choose, you know, do they want a few community representatives to kind of be around a table and then have more of a, you know, sort of broader audience, or like, because you're gonna figure out also how you hold these meetings, right? And how you hear from folks, so.
Okay, so can we, as a matter of course, say those are the 4 ad hoc members for governance, and we have interested community members, list their names, but not put them on the ad hoc.
Absolutely.
And then beyond these, there's other people that might want to be involved, they can be included as well. Yeah.
If that's the case, then I'll see my physician dispenser who really wants to be on it, but wouldn't because.
That's fine. Okay. Because you wanted to swap them?
So I'm gonna take you off.
Yeah, and put Spencer.
Okay.
Does that prevent me from being on it?
No, because you're not on the ad.
You'd be a community member.
You'd be a community member.
I thought that there was a community ad hoc.
Well, we could have community members, but this gets around some of those issues and we can engage without you officially being on it.
Okay.
Through the
I
chair,
spent
we
a lot of
also
time
have,
thinking about this so far, and so I wanted to be able to
Yeah,
participate as much as I can on that.
absolutely. And you're kind of committing to being in all those meetings without being official. You can't vote on that anyway, because you're not on the council.
we do still have Patty online with her hand raised, and also Sheila.
Patty.
I apologize, it's lowered.
Okay. Sheila?
Sheila, you may unmute.
Hi, so I think there was an agenda item that today that was going to discuss the plaza, and I know we've gone over, so maybe it's not going to be included, or I misunderstood the agenda, but I thought that the topic was going to include the plaza redesign.
Yeah, that's the next agenda item.
Okay, so that next agenda item today or next meeting?
Okay.
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 We're never on time.
Yeah, well, these are important ones, so anyway, okay, so can we get a vote on that, the ad hoc and the 4 ad hoc members?
Oh, we voted on the ad hoc.
I'm sorry, the 4 ad hoc members, just so we have it all down on paper.
I move that we form that ad hoc.
With those 4 people?
With those 4 people.
Okay.
So
I second
Spencer, Betsy, Brian, and Patty.
Second, all in favor, raise your hands. Okay, great. Okay, that's awesome. We're gonna move on to the plaza.
Right now.
What? No, we're not gonna move over there. So, either Debbie or Supervisor Hoffman can explain a little bit more about how this money is gonna be allocated. The topic here is about allocation of funds for improvements to the plaza. I know there are security issues. I know there are sheriff issues. That is not the topic of this conversation. We are, and we have talked about this, we are committed to having that discussion. But my fear is we just bring the sheriff in here, complain, right? Nothing's gonna potentially happen. So I'm working with Debbie and engaging other folks as well to figure out how to bring this to the MAC in a productive way. So if we have a special meeting, or which we probably would have on this topic because it's such a big one, we will do that, but there may be a way around just getting a no, because we've asked before and we get a no. What I would say to everyone is every little thing you see, whether you're in Guerneville or in Forestville or in Hacienda or in Cazadero or Rio Neto or wherever, report bad activity. The more phone calls that go into the sheriff's office lines, the more they have to it gets officially logged. And counts do in fact matter. So do that right now. But I am committed to bringing this topic to the MAC, but it's not the topic of discussion for tonight. So that said, we have some infrastructure money that is the discretion of Supervisor Hopkins. Part of it is, will be for the plaza area. And I know people have ideas about that and what it should be. So I would like to form an ad hoc. My gut tells me it should be the two Guerneville reps, since we're talking about Guerneville. And I wouldn't mind being on it as well, and then engage probably with a community member on this ad hoc, which to me makes sense to have someone from the Chamber of Commerce represented here, because they get input from a lot of businesses, not just one. And remember, these ad hocs don't just talk amongst themselves. The job of this group is to reach out to as many people and bring back some ideas on how this plaza should be created, changed, whatever. And there's a whole bunch of issues that surround that, from, is it an events space? Is there a way to prevent people coming there that you don't want there? There's a whole bunch of things that this ad hoc can think about and bring back to us, that we can then send to Supervisor Hopkins for consideration to fund.
Do you want me to explain
Yep.
funding?
Yep.
Okay, so the funding, we have, well, when we sort of sat down to discuss it as a team, we had sort of around $5 million of funding to allocate.
And you spend some.
So, not this past year's budget hearing, but one budget hearing ago, we were able to secure $2 million of community infrastructure fund to meet infrastructure needs in Western Sonoma County. But in the most recent budget hearing, we were able to secure $4 million. So, it was $6 million total, but we had spent some and we still had a little bit of a balance. And so we met as a team to try to create some fair allocations, amongst towns, to try to make sure that this, total of $6 million would show actual progress in kind of all of our small towns in Sonoma County. And we identified Guerneville as having a need for a number of infrastructure improvements. Notably, there's been a group that's been meeting around the concept of a downtown park. And so while that would be eligible for ag and open space matching grant funds, there will need to be some seed money to sort of kick that process off, and also to provide a bit of a match to those ag and open space matching grant funds. And then we also were hearing about sort of, the challenges that we're experiencing in the plaza. And while we cannot control law enforcement, you have an independently elected sheriff who does that. We thought that maybe an infrastructure upgrade could potentially sort of change what happens at the plaza by changing the infrastructure itself. And so, I think it's really important. I love the idea of an ad hoc, and I think it'd be really important to work with the chamber and also especially hear from all of the property owners. I've definitely heard from Susie, about the impacts to her business. And so anyway, long story short, we earmarked $750,000 for Guerneville to sort of fund both the, the seed funding for the park as well as upgrades to the plaza. And then we can also touch base with anyone who has questions about what their community, you know, is sort of getting out of those funds. But that was, we feel like, you know, Guerneville is a hub for a lot of surrounding communities. Also, a lot of folks come to Safeway, come to the post office, and that it was important to make some investments there.
Great, thank you. Any comments from council on the formation of ad hoc? That structure, what they would be doing?
And can I just have one thing? So
I suppose.
technically, like, it still needs to be approved by my colleagues on the Board of
Yeah.
Supervisors, so it's not like I just get to wave a magic wand. But so far, all of those recommendations, well, except for one, has sort of gone forward without, you know, with a unanimous vote of support. So I just wanted to flag that.
Excellent. But having it come, I'm assuming having it blessed by the MAC
Would be great.
and then by you guys
Yes.
actually makes an influence on the board.
Yes.
That's what we want to do this way. Betsy,
Linda, I wonder if you could give us a specific dollar figure that would specifically be applied to the plaza? Or is it just all out there?
We're currently sort of trying to work with the community on what, we don't even know what the scope of the project is, right? So it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, where, you know, we need to learn more about what is the community park going to look like, what is an open space going to provide, and then what do folks want to happen to the plaza?
Right, is the dog park part of this discussion?
The dog park would be part of the
Oh,
downtown
park.
park, yeah, and we're gonna start with, just for, so everyone knows, with the property behind the park and ride, and looking at improving that space to become a public park. There have been requests for, you know, tables, maybe, you know, sort of picnicking facilities, trails, potentially soccer, you know, goals, dog park, those are all under discussion. And we have Brian and Stephanie from Praxis looking at potential designs.
and Joe,
On the ad hoc. So we've got two different things going on. We're talking about the physical plaza here tonight. But the ad hoc is going to consider all aspects of the plaza. Is that correct? Not just the physical change?
what do you,
Well,
I don't know if I understand your question.
yeah, you wanted to limit the conversation tonight to what physically we could do there to make it a more attractive place.
Well, I think we would take all of the community inputs about what we want that space to be used for. And maybe what it's currently being used for and how we can design and build this, make a proposal for what we would spend that money on.
Right.
Taking a holistic approach of the feedback we get is my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Council, any other comments or questions? Public, anyone have any questions or comments on that? Do you guys kind of think that this is an okay approach for us to take? Yeah? Okay.
I just have a quick comment on that. So whatever happens in that park, then are people going to think about that in relation to how it ties with the progression of the town overall?
And that's the point, that's the point of the ad hoc?
Is to
figure that out.
because it could thematically.
Yep.
It's huge.
Mags?
Hi, so I'm actually Mags. I am the president of the chamber for those who don't know me. I was pleasantly surprised to hear this. I literally sent an email like about a month ago saying, hey, what can we do with the plaza? How about this, this, and this? Because I had been thinking about different community events and how we could use the plaza better, because right now, ergonomically, it's not all that approachable. And so I've already been thinking about this for a long time because we have events at the plaza. Sometimes less is more. And also there's the bus stop there. I don't know if that, you know, needs to stay there. We don't have to go to those ideas yet. But I'd love to hear input. I'd love to be on that ad hoc team. We have events there. We know what goes on, and we do a lot of contract events as well for other people. So thank you. I think that's great.
Okay.
I would just encourage the ad hoc. There's I think a lot of research that's been done around this exact type of civic initiative where it's like remolding a space in order to like change the way it's behaved through like subtle cues. But just encourage the ad hoc to do build upon the knowledge base that already exists in some of like the
And don't
civic
go from
literature.
scratch.
Yeah, because there is a lot of like really good thinking about how this has worked in other cities and like great case studies that we can pull from. So
Okay.
rather than just like, it'd be cool to have a cactus. Like let's, we can start with some basis of strategy that's built on, that's built on like actual learnings from projects like these.
Okay.
At that point, in the Castro district, we just concluded like a 3-year process to redesign the Hardyville Plaza. And it required an enormous amount of community input. We had to deal with the issues of unhoused people that currently spend a lot of time in that area, transportation, concerns of the local business community. Wonderful woman who spearheaded that, named Andrea Aiello, and I'd be happy to, really would encourage you to reach out to her, because I think she just learned so much from it. And we ended up with a design that the entire community felt so good about. And not it's by the money, but then we'll take care of that.
Vesta.
Yeah, so there's 2 projects you're talking about. One is to rebuild the downtown plaza so that it's more community oriented. And then you're talking about a public park and it's down by the parking lot?
Those are 2 separate
2 separate.
things.
Same funding.
The same bucket of money, but the ad
Oh,
hoc
same
is,
bucket of
the ad
money.
hoc is focused on the plaza.
Gotcha, okay, yeah, thank you. Just needed
Yeah.
to clarify, yeah.
Anyone else have any comments? Anyone, Tracy, they have their hands up?
If anyone would like to comment online, please raise your hand. I'm
All
not
right,
seeing
great.
any hands.
All right, so if I can, let's just do it in one fell swoop. If I can get a motion to form this ad hoc that would consist of the 2 Gurnville Macs. Well, wait, hold on. Was it you 2, Betsy, or just the two?
I would participate. I'd be happy to.
Okay.
And I'm also Gurnville.
Because you're good, that's why I'm like looking at you, you make sense as well.
Now I'll make that motion.
And then have Mags be the community member officially on the ad hoc representing the chamber. With the goal of this being to get community input, research I think that's great input into looking at other places that have done this, so that would be part of the ad hoc's mission here. And then bring that back to the MAC. I'm thinking this is also a shorter term ad hoc. 2 months?
It depends on what do you want done in that time?
What I just said.
Yeah.
Is there a
Right?
timeline on the funding?
So, there is not an official timeline on the funding, but to be candid, like, want to spend it as soon as possible,
Yeah.
because otherwise, other supervisors could claw it back in a future budget hearing. But we have talked about potentially transferring funding over to like Sonoma County Public Infrastructure, who owns this property for this purpose. So, we can work on that, but it would be great to have someone from our staff also on the ad hoc, just so that we can hear, so that we can then provide that feedback to someone
And then,
for
should
design.
that be Shay?
So I think it would be great to have it be Shay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then.
And then also please just at least include Susie. I promised Susie a meeting, so I want to make sure that she has, the property, adjacent property owners are consulted by.
So given what you just said, is 2 months too long?
No, because I think we can still move forward with potentially transferring funds to a department for implementing this.
Got it, okay. So 2 months.
Okay.
Unless you guys think you can do it faster, 2 months, and then, those ad hoc members. So, motion,
I so moved.
second,
Second.
raise your hands, all agree? Awesome.
Can I ask a quick question of you, Linda? Would it make sense for us to get input from infrastructure? I mean, if they're in charge of the park, I mean, it would make sense to have some kind of, I was under the impression that they were gonna be invited to this meeting.
Well, we were originally talking about them and the sheriff, but.
Because it would
Did
make.
you have
sense.
Fixing roads, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they really know what goes on. But maybe,
Well, yeah, I don't-
maybe
I'm
tell me.
not-
I don't think they do. I think the better plan, so first of all, I want them to try to focus on repairing Rio Nito and.
Yeah.
Benny Road, so they're just slammed right now with the storm damage and more, there's gonna be another windstorm, by the way, next week that's shaping up. More trees down, yay. So I would say that it's actually better to come up with, here's our wish list. What of these things can you deliver? And then we can always sort of take things off if we can't, or we can phase it over time if we can't get everything. But I would love for you to come up with a vision and then we just go to them and say, this is what we want.
And
And they say, you can have this, and not that.
Yeah.
my experience tells me that these guys will know if they should engage quicker rather than later or whatever. But I think we all have the same agenda, so that's a good thing.
And Johannes wants to help. I love working with him because he wants to find creative solutions for the community. So I think he will truly do his best to meet what we ask for if we have funds, so.
Okay, great. We're actually gonna move on to the next subject.
Well, just really quick, Doug DeVivo with River Arts and he owns the Blue Doors. He's done a bunch of drawings about the park and ways to clean it up. He's got like full-on drawings. So if anybody ever taps his shoulder.
Okay.
The plaza or the park? Well, can I?
Plaza.
In, well, he's such a part of information.
The plaza.
I think we finished the agenda item because we've appointed the ad hoc, and then now the ad hoc exists and you can go directly to them. But we got to move on to the next thing because we're running really long. Sorry, I don't like to cut people off, but I gotta keep thinking. All right, we have some committee reports. Those are all written reports, so they are in the community cleanup. Report will be in the March agenda. Land use. So land use had a joint meeting with the Lower Russian River MAC, and it needed to reform. Mike, Patty and Joe have expressed interest in staying on the land use committee. Patty has agreed to chair the committee. Is that, I'm getting that correctly? And then Herman Hernandez was the community member on that ad hoc, and he's no longer gonna do that. Nick, I believe you raised your hand to be a community member on that. So we need to formally make that formal and real, not fake and not formal. So can I get a motion?
And you can have one more member too. Was there?
Yeah, there is.
Give it to me.
What is
That's
this?
Patty Joe. Oh, okay, all right. Okay,
Yeah.
so, okay,
Didn't want to leave it.
sorry. Okay, great. So can I get a motion to approve that ad hoc as
So moved.
discussed at the land use? Second? Everyone's hands raised? Yes, no? Yep.
It's not an ad hoc.
I'm sorry, standing debate. Sorry, Mike.
But this is the one that,
Yeah, you can't vote.
I abstain.
All right. Okay, we have here a list of some future potential agenda items. So if anyone else has any desire for a certain topic to be on our agenda, please send it to either Fifth District, or you can look on the Lower Russian River map site, and all of us have our contact information on it. That's another way to get, or you can tell me directly. And then we will consider that for future agendas.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Is somebody presenting on the care court implementation plan?
we're reaching out to DHS.
And like I said, public safety is on that list, and that is really related to public safety downtown and the plaza. And with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I so moved.
All right. Second?
Second.
Raise hands, yes? All right, great. Thank you, everyone.